Good morning. You are looking live at launch site 31 of the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, where for the second time in 48 hours, an unpiloted Soyuz 2.1A booster and the Progress 68 cargo craft atop the third stage of that booster are fully fueled, ready for launch just 31 minutes from now on a two-day journey to deliver almost 3 tons of food, fuel, and supplies to the 6 crew members aboard the International Space Station. And again, good morning and welcome to our coverage of the launch attempt today for the Progress 68 cargo craft here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. In this early morning on a Saturday, the Orbit 1 team of flight controllers on duty, led by Flight Director Anthony Varia. They have looked at all of the systems on board the International Space Station and polled a go for the launch of the Progress 68 to the international outpost. Varia relayed that to his Russian counterpart at the Russian Mission Control Center on the outskirts of Moscow in the town of Korolyov. All of the Progress's systems are in great shape as you look at a view from a balcony camera overlooking that large flight control room. Down in Baikonur, it is a gorgeous Saturday afternoon, some 64 degrees Fahrenheit, clear skies for this launch attempt that comes 48 hours after a last-minute scrub due to a glitch on the launch pad with the vehicle that apparently has been corrected and now fully fueled once again. About 20 minutes ago, the gantry arms spread. You see one of the 2 service towers buttressed up against the Soyuz booster. That is one of 2 servicing towers, the largest of which services the upper stage of the Soyuz booster. The smaller of the 2 servicing towers that is just out of the field of view in this view down the railroad tracks that the Soyuz booster and the Progress rolled to the launch pad on back on Tuesday. The smaller of the 2 servicing towers services the core stage of the Soyuz booster. It did not retract as planned about 12 seconds before launch on Tuesday, and the automated launch sequencer did not activate, and there was no main engine start and no engine start sequence that was initiated. The launch was scrubbed and rescheduled for the next opportunity, which of course is today, just 29 minutes from now. Again, all of the systems on the Soyuz booster and the Progress are reported to be in excellent shape. Once the liftoff occurs, that liftoff scheduled at 3:46 and 53 seconds a.m. Central Time, 4:46:53 Eastern Time, which is 2:46 p.m. at the Cosmodrome. Once that launch occurs, it will take 8 minutes, 46 seconds for the third stage to shut down and the spacecraft to separate. After the navigational antennas and solar arrays on the Progress are deployed seconds later, it will begin a 2-day, not a 2-orbit, but a 2-day chase to reach the International Space Station for an automated docking to the Pirs docking compartment on Monday, with docking scheduled at 6:09 a.m. Central Time, 7:09 a.m. Eastern Time. The Progress is loaded, as we mentioned, with 2.9 tons of food, fuel, and supplies for the crew members on board the International Space Station. That breaks down to 1,940 pounds of propellant, 51 pounds of oxygen, 53 pounds of air, 926 pounds of water, and 2,976 pounds of dry cargo and spare parts for this delivery to the International Space Station. The Progress is scheduled to remain linked up to the Pirs docking compartment for the next 5 months. At the time of launch, 27.5 minutes from now, the International Space Station will be flying 251 statute miles over the South Atlantic, just north of the Falkland Islands. The chase will be on for the Progress to reach the International Space Station. There will be 2 important rendezvous burns that will be scheduled later in the day today to increase the Progress's altitude relative to the space station and to fine-tune its path to the international complex. Another burn schedule for Sunday, and then in the wee hours on Monday morning, what is called automated rendezvous operations will begin, and that ultimately will lead to the docking of the Progress to the Pirs docking compartment again on Monday at 6:09 a.m. Central Time, 7:09 a.m. Eastern Time. After the launch scrub occurred on Thursday, the Russian State Commission convened down in Baikonur. They reviewed all the parameters regarding the events associated with the countdown, targeted the launch for today. And earlier today, several hours ago, met once again and gave the go for the fueling of the Soyuz 2.1A booster. That all went by the book, and no issues are reported as we move into the final minutes of the countdown that should culminate with liftoff 25 minutes and 44 seconds from now. Launch Site 31 that you're looking at right now is just a short 20-minute transport of the Soyuz booster horizontal on a railroad car from its integration building that is just at the end of these railroad tracks as you're looking down the tracks in this view, courtesy of Roscosmos and Tsenki down at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. The manned Soyuz vehicles, most of the manned Soyuz launches occur from Site 1, called Gagarin's Start, the launch pad from which Yuri Gagarin launched out of to become the first human to fly in space back on April 12, 1961. This particular launch pad has seen two expedition crews in recent years launch from when the other pad was undergoing some maintenance and modifications, but most of the Progress launches do occur from Site 31, and again, the integration building in which the various stages of the Soyuz booster and the Progress itself are mated together to one another is about a 20-minute trek down that railroad track from the integration facility to the launch pad itself, where the vehicle is hydraulically lifted into its vertical position. The gantry arms swing around the vehicle, and that enables technicians to move into the final days of pre-launch checks of the fuel system, the electrical system, and all of the avionics on the Soyuz booster. Aboard the International Space Station, the 6 crew members are enjoying a quiet Saturday morning. No chatter yet on the space-to-ground loops from the crew on board. This is typical for a Saturday morning. The crew will be up and running, doing their weekend activities, Earth photography, and in this case, an early review of some of the preparations for the final spacewalk, and a trio of spacewalks being conducted this month. That spacewalk, the third and final spacewalk in the series, is scheduled to be conducted next Friday, October 20th, by Randy Bresnik and Joe Acaba out of the Quest airlock of the International Space Station, designed to replace a camera light on the newly installed latching end effector at the end of the Canadarm2 robotic arm, as well as to install an enhanced high-definition camera on the starboard 1 truss of the complex, as well as other maintenance and preparatory tasks for future spacewalk activity. Bresnik and Acaba are scheduled to venture out of the Quest airlock on that spacewalk next Friday at 7:05 a.m. Central Time. 8:05 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll begin our NASA television coverage on October 20th at 5:30 a.m. Central, 6:30 a.m. Eastern Time. It will be the 5th spacewalk in Randy Bresnik's career and the 3rd for Joe Acaba. 21 minutes until launch. Everything continues to march in fine fashion toward a liftoff again at 3:46 and 53 seconds a.m. Central Time, 2:46 and 53 seconds p.m. at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. It will be 8 minutes and 46 seconds for the Progress to reach its preliminary orbit. Once it separates from the upper stage of the Soyuz 2.1A booster, it then will deploy on automated computer command its navigational antennas, its solar arrays, and begin the chase to catch up to the complex. Again, as we mentioned, at the time of launch, the station will be flying over the South Atlantic, north of the Falkland Islands. This is a two-day rendezvous based on the orbital mechanics that this two-day launch postponement provided. Had the launch occurred on Thursday, it would have been a swift two-orbit rendezvous, the first ever attempted for a Russian visiting vehicle to the International Space Station. That will have to wait for another day. Today's launch attempt and the Keplerian laws involved with the orbital mechanics put this on a two-day rendezvous, which is the standard default rendezvous capability for a Soyuz booster carrying either a Progress or a piloted Soyuz spacecraft to the International Space Station. Coming up on the T-minus 18-minute mark in the countdown, about 9 minutes from now, the launch conductor at the blockhouse at the Baikonur Cosmodrome will insert a launch key, a real key that is inserted into a launch sequencing activation device, which transitions the launch sequence into an automatic mode. About a minute and a half afterward, the launch control team will report the readiness of the Soyuz booster and the Progress resupply ship for launch. That will be relayed to the Russian flight control team at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov on the outskirts of Moscow. Once the Progress reaches orbit, this team you're looking at in the flight control room in Korolyov will take over control of the operation of the Progress as it automatically makes its way toward the International Space Station for a link-up on Monday morning. This launch site that you're looking at, Site 31, a very remote site at the Baikonur Cosmodrome, some 20 miles or so away from Launch Site 1, where most of the manned Soyuz missions are launched from, that being Yuri Gagarin's launch pad at Site 1. This launch site is in an area where a number of camels and even piglets roam from time to time, depending on the time of year. Again, in the early fall days down at the Cosmodrome in the Central Asian Desert, it is particularly warm today, about 64 degrees Fahrenheit. All activities have been going very smoothly since the launch scrub on Thursday. The vehicle is declared ready for launch. Liftoff planned 15.5 minutes from now. Inside 14 minutes until the launch of the Soyuz booster and the Progress 68 resupply craft that again will be delivering just about 3 tons of food, fuel, and supplies for the Expedition 53 crew. Good view of the flame trench under the Soyuz booster, which has been venting liquid oxygen. Of course, it continues to have its fuel replenished until the final minutes before launch. About 2 minutes and 45 seconds before liftoff, the fuel and oxidizer tanks are pressurized on the Soyuz booster. That optimizes fuel flow and provides structural rigidity to the launch vehicles as it sits on its launch pad. The booster and the Progress resupply craft will arch out to the northeast, heading for an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator. At this hour, the International Space Station is flying over the South Pacific, moving from northwest to southeast at an altitude of 251 statute miles, soon to cross the southern coast of Chile and back out over the South Atlantic just north of the Falkland Islands, where it will be at the time of liftoff. 10 minutes, 40 seconds until launch. The countdown continues to go very smoothly. No issues being worked by the launch control team down in Baikonur. Assuming a nominal launch today and a smooth 2-day transit to the International Space Station. Again, the docking is planned for Monday morning at 6:09 a.m. Central Time, 7:09 a.m. Eastern Time. Once the docking occurs, the Progress hooks will be closed to form a tight interface and a hard mate between the Progress and the docking port at the Pirs docking compartment, where it will reside for the next 5 months. Russian cosmonauts Sergei Ryazanskiy and Alexander Mazurkin will conduct leak checks at the docking interface between the Progress and the Pirs docking compartment over the course of the next 2 orbits after link-up occurs, before the hatches are open and the unloading of the cargo inside the Progress begins. Coming up on the 7-minute mark until launch, and the activation of the automated launch sequencer by the launch conductor down in Baikonur. A good view on a cloudless day at the Baikonur Cosmodrome of the Soyuz 2.1A booster, ready for launch in less than 6.5 minutes. All of the ground measurement systems have now been activated down at the blockhouse in Baikonur as we come up on the 5.5-minute mark. T-minus 5 minutes and counting. All Soyuz and Progress systems are reported to be in good shape. The Soyuz combustion chamber nitrogen purge is underway. T-minus 4 minutes and counting. No issues being worked down in Baikonur. Coming up on the 3-minute mark until launch. The International Space Station currently flying over southern Argentina. The fuel tanks are now being pressurized, and the ground resupply of oxidizer to the launch vehicle is being terminated. Two and a half minutes until launch. And the booster tank pressurization is complete. Everything in good shape on the Soyuz booster, coming up on the 2-minute mark. T-minus 2 minutes and counting. "90 seconds until launch." T-minus 1 minute until launch. At about the 35-second mark, the first of the two servicing towers buttressed up against the side of the Soyuz booster will retract. At the T-minus 12-second mark, the second of those two servicing towers will retract to initiate the automated launch sequence.
Есть переход блока И на бортовое питание 30. Есть отрыв холодной пневмоколонок блока И. Есть наполнительно, есть мачта.
There's the retraction of the first of the servicing towers.
Руководитель я принял первый.
The second tower now is beginning to retract. The automated launch sequence underway, standing by for main engine start. Main engine start initiated. Turbo pumps and engines up to flight speed. And liftoff. Liftoff of the 68th Progress resupply craft, bound on a 2-day journey to the International Space Station. Good roll, yaw, and pitch program reported. Good parameters. Stage 1 engines operating normally. The Soyuz boosters arcing out to the northeast. The vehicle is reported to be in good, stable configuration. Coming up on the 1-minute mark into the flight. Good pressure in the combustion chambers. A good ride so far for the Progress resupply craft. All the control systems are reported to be in good shape as we pass the 90-second mark into the flight. All engines operating normally. Standing by for first stage shutdown and separation. Yaw pitch and roll program is all normal. And we've had confirmation of first stage separation. 2 minutes, 20 seconds into the flight, the vehicle traveling 4,500 miles an hour, 29 miles in altitude, 29 miles downrange from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. All structural parameters are reported to be normal. Second stage engine performance reported nominal from the blockhouse down in Baikonur. All control systems are reported to be in excellent shape. Just over 3 minutes into the flight. It will take 8 minutes, 46 seconds for the Progress to reach its preliminary orbit. And the shroud has been jettisoned, covering the Progress 68 cargo craft, now exposed to its own space travel. Second stage engines continue to perform normally. 3.5 minutes into the flight. The Soyuz booster traveling more than 6,000 miles an hour, 66 miles in altitude, 125 miles downrange from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. About 1 more minute left in second stage performance. The third stage will ignite before the separation of the second stage in what is called a hot stage firing. The second stage engines continue to fire normally. 4 minutes, 15 seconds into the flight. Yaw pitch and roll program all normal. Liftoff again occurred at 3:46 and 53 seconds a.m. Central Time, 4:46 a.m. and 53 seconds Eastern Time, 2:46 p.m. at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. All Soyuz booster parameters are normal. 4 minutes 47 seconds into the flight, standing by for second stage shutdown and separation. And we've had third stage ignition, second stage shutdown and separation. The Progress 68 riding atop the singular power of the third stage engines right now for the remainder of powered flight. Coming up on the 5.5 minute mark into the flight. All vehicle parameters are reported to be normal. The flight control team at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov standing by to take over control of the Progress's journey to the International Space Station after third stage shutdown and separation. Coming up on the 6 minute mark into the flight, the third stage of the Soyuz booster traveling almost 11,000 miles an hour, 115 miles in altitude, some 472 miles downrange from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Good performance from that third stage engine. No issues reported. About 2 minutes of powered flight remaining. Vehicle very stable. Good third stage performance. Yaw pitch and roll program continues to perform normally for the Soyuz booster's upper stage and the Progress 68 cargo craft. The vehicle traveling more than 13,000 miles an hour, 124 miles in altitude. All parameters are normal, about 1 minute of powered flight remaining.
Control systems,
8 minutes, 10 seconds into the flight. About 30 seconds or so of powered flight remaining. Everything is stable and looking good. Yaw pitch and roll program is all normal as we stand by for third stage shutdown and spacecraft separation. Third stage shutdown, spacecraft separation reported. Standing by for navigational antenna and solar array deploy. And the report from the Russian Mission Control Center is that all navigational antennas and solar arrays have been deployed as planned. So a perfect ascent to orbit, 2 days behind schedule, but safe and sound nonetheless, as the Progress 68 has entered its preliminary orbit, headed on a 2-day journey to the International Space Station. So to recap, 2 days after a last-second glitch caused a postponement in the launch of the Progress 68 cargo craft, today everything went as smooth as silk. Down to the Baikonur Cosmodrome, a flawless countdown, an on-time liftoff at 3:46 and 53 seconds a.m. Central Time, 2:46 and 53 seconds p.m. in Baikonur. All of the ascent milestones ticked off in perfect fashion, a perfect performance by the Soyuz 2.1A booster. The Progress entering its preliminary orbit a short time ago, deploying all of its navigational antennas, its TV boom, and its solar arrays. And all of its systems are reported to be in good shape as it begins the chase to catch the International Space Station that was flying over the South Atlantic north of the Falkland Islands at the time of liftoff. And the Progress has already performed a self-test of its core's automated rendezvous system. That all looks very good. This will be a fully automated rendezvous to the International Space Station with an automated docking scheduled on Monday at 6:09 a.m. Central Time, 7:09 a.m. Eastern Time. In the highly unlikely event that a problem would crop up with the cores, the 2 Russian cosmonauts on board the station, Sergei Rosansky and Alexander Mazurkin, will be standing by in the Zvezda service module at a control panel called the Taurus system, the telerobotically operated rendezvous system, to take over manual control of the flying of the Soyuz should that become necessary. However, so far so good. The core system in its preliminary self-test has checked out in excellent shape, and all of the Progress systems are looking good. And while the Progress begins its chase of the International Space Station, a good view from external cameras on the complex as it flies over the South Atlantic, moving from southwest to northeast, soon to cross the west coast of Africa. You're looking at the Soyuz vehicle that carried Randy Bresnik, Paulo Nespoli, and Sergei Rosansky to the International Space Station back in July. It is docked to the Rosviet module on the Earth-facing side of the Russian segment of the International Space Station. And this first test of the camera on the Progress 68 cargo craft, giving the flight control team at the Russian Mission Control Center outside Moscow an initial look at some of the parameters that are being relayed through this cross-haired telemetry camera that you're all familiar with, having watched Progress and Soyuz approaches to the International Space Station in the past. Again, a flawless liftoff for the Progress vehicle. Altitude and fine-tune its path to the station. Another rendezvous burn schedule for Sunday, and then early Monday morning we will begin automated rendezvous operations, and we'll bring you all of that activity on NASA TV Monday. Our programming plan for Monday calls for us to Return to the air at 5:15 a.m. Central Time, 6:15 a.m. Eastern Time with our Progress 68 rendezvous and docking coverage. Link up to the Piers docking compartment is scheduled at 6:09 a.m. Central, 7:09 a.m. Eastern Time. So we'll look forward to you joining us once again on Monday morning. Again, a perfect launch, a flawless ascent for Progress 68, safely en route to the International Space Station for a docking on Monday morning. That will wrap up our coverage for today. In the meantime, have a great weekend. This is Mission Control Houston.